Hi everyone, this is Celine from Blue Calla Patterns. In this video series, we'll be making the Bellflower Backpack. This was my second pattern from the Carried Away Pattern Collective. That was the 6-month subscription, so this was my second pattern. Before we start sewing the bag, we're going to go through all of the different pieces that you need to cut from the various pattern pieces that come with the pattern. And I'm also going to go through the notions and supplies list that you'll need. So in terms of hardware, you will need the following pieces. You will need 2 1-inch rectangle rings and 2 1-inch rectangle slides. So these will become the, they'll be used for the adjustable shoulder straps for your backpack. You will also need 1 18mm magnetic snap. This will be used for the bottom flap that sits just beneath the main flap of the bag. Then you'll need a turn lock. This is a small turn lock from Emmeline Bags. You'll need this for the top flap. And then for the top carry handle, you'll need 2 screw-in oblong grommets. These are also from Emmeline Bags. And if you go to her website, you can actually see the dimensions of these grommets if you're not able to order from her. Make sure that you order some that are exactly the same size so that they fit properly at the top folded edge of the main flap. In terms of other supplies you'll need an 8-inch dress zipper. This will be for your interior zipper pocket. You'll also need either fabric glue, I use Fabri-Tac, or double-sided tape. Make sure that it's tape that you can sew through, or if you can't find tape that you can sew through, just make sure you don't put any tape where you'll be sewing. And then you'll also need some fray check for the installation of the grommets and the magnetic snap and the turn lock. So I'm going to quickly show you a Bellflower backpack, just introduce you to all the different parts of the bag so that when I go over the cut pieces, it makes a little bit more sense. So this is one of the very first sample bags that I made from the pattern. It has this top main flap, and this here is the black piece here, the black vinyl. This is your flap contrast piece, and inside there is the Peltex piece. So I'll show you that when we're cutting the pieces. This is the oblong grommets, the screw-in kind that you can get at Emmeline Bags. So you'll see the reason why you want to get grommets that are exactly this size is because you really want them to fit nicely in this space here. And you'll also want to do a test once you've chosen the materials that you would like to use. I recommend making I guess a fabric sandwich with all the layers that you'll have here, just to make sure that the space in between the two parts of the grommet will fit nicely. It's okay if it seems a little bit of a tight fit. It's better for it to be really snug than for it to be loose. So this is the top handle piece, and I've attached it using rivets. On the back, we just, again, flap contrast piece, and then here's your 2 adjustable straps. For this one, I chose to use a contrasting fabric on the underside of the strap, but in this video, I'm going to be using full cork to make my straps, and so I'll show you that in a bit. So if I open up the main flap, I have another smaller flap just beneath it. So here's your magnetic snap, the turn lock for the main flap, and then this is actually a very large slip pocket. I'll close that, and then on the inside of the bag you have a zipper pocket and you have 2 slip pockets. So it's not really very complicated. The parts are fairly simple. When we make the bag, it might be slightly different than this one, just because, as I said, this was one of my very first sample bags and I did make a few slight changes. Unfortunately, it's the only sample I have left. I actually sold the rest. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of the different pockets and the different pieces for the bag. Okay, the pieces that you'll need to cut are, for the top flap, the main flap of the bag, you're going to use your flap pattern piece, and you will decide what focus fabric you want on the front. So in the bag that I showed you, it's this portion right here, so that's your flap focus. You'll take your pattern piece and you're going to fold it at this dashed line, and you're going to use this bottom portion to cut your focus fabric. And you're going to want to make sure that your direction of your fabric is in this direction when you're cutting this piece. So you'll see it matches. And then I have my focal fabric, my fusible woven interfacing, and a fusible fleece piece. Now, the only part of this bag that will use fusible fleece is this portion of the flap. The rest of the bag will be using foam interfacing, and I recommend using the foam because this is intended to be a structured bag. I feel that it really won't look very good if you end up using fusible fleece instead of foam. Of course, you can do what you prefer, but I highly recommend using foam interfacing. Now, also from the flap piece, you're going to cut one lining fabric and one fusible woven interfacing, which I seem to have misplaced. We'll find it in a bit. So you will need to have one lining fabric, but this time, when you cut it, you'll notice I have direction arrows on the pattern piece. So when you're cutting the lining fabric, you want your print to go this way so that when you open your flap, that your print isn't upside down. As you can see, my skulls are right side up when I open up my flap. Okay, and you should also have your fusible woven interfacing, which I have mysteriously misplaced. Also, for the main flap, you're going to cut one flap contrast. So I'm using cork, but you can use fabric or vinyl, whatever you prefer. If you're using vinyl or cork, you don't need the fusible woven interfacing. If you're using fabric, make sure that you also cut a piece of fusible woven interfacing. Now, not mentioned on this pattern piece, it's written in the cutting instructions of the pattern. You'll also need to cut this piece of flap handle Peltex. It's 8.5 inches wide by 2 3/4 inches high, and that will be added to this flap contrast piece a little bit later. Okay, so this is my top flap. This piece here is my flap handle piece, and it's 15 inches long and 4 inches wide. Again, you can use fabric for this flap handle if you prefer. If you do choose to use fabric, just make sure you cut a piece of matching fusible woven interfacing and fuse it to the wrong side. For my lower flap, again, I'm going to be using my cork, so I'm not going to put fusible woven interfacing. If you're using fabric, again, make sure you do cut a matching piece. This will be my flap lining piece, so that will be on the underside. And because I'm using fabric for the lining, I have fusible woven interfacing, and I also have fusible fleece. Sorry, so earlier I said that this was the only piece that used fleece, but both flaps will be using fleece. Okay, and then also for the exterior, I have, these are my two gusset pieces. So the gusset is what gives the bag its depth. So you'll see there's two pieces and they're joined at the bottom with the seam. And both of these pieces need a matching piece of foam interfacing. Now for the exterior of the bag, You're going to be using 2 pieces to prepare these, the front and the back of your bag on the exterior. You're going to need your exterior lower panel and your exterior top panel. You're also going to end up using this piece to cut your interior slip pockets, but I will show you that when I show you the lining pieces. So for now, you're going to use the full piece, and you're going to cut 2 exterior pieces. You're cutting on the fold here, and you'll also note on the pattern piece you have a mark showing the position of your turn lock for the top flap and a magnetic snap position for the lower flap. So these will be my 2 exterior fabrics, and this will be the top portion. So I'm going to show you why there's 2 pieces. So there are 2 pieces because this piece is used here at the top, and you'll see your lower flap is actually sewn in between a lining piece and one of these exterior top panel pieces. And then at the back, your flap is also sewn into one of these pieces and one of the exterior lower panel pieces. And the reason why I did that is to avoid the bulk of having the flap right in the top seam. Okay, so you need from exterior top panel 2 exterior pieces with matching fusible woven interfacing. With exterior lower panel, you need 2 exterior fabric and 2 fusible woven interfacing. Then you also need to cut 2 lining pieces with matching interfacing. And these lining pieces are actually the lining of this interior, this giant slip pocket on the front of your bag. And then these 2 foam pieces, they're going to be used for your exterior back and front panels, but only once you've assembled all of these pieces. So you're going to cut them, and you're going to actually cut them using the lining piece, but you're not going to use them right away in the interfacing section. You're going to use them a little bit later on during the exterior assembly of the pattern. Okay, so I'm just going to set this aside. I'm going to keep this because we are going to use it to cut some lining pieces. Okay, so using the lining piece, you have to cut your 2 main lining panels. Okay, so here they are, and matching fusible interfacing. And then in one of these panels, we're going to sew up our slip pocket. Now the slip pocket, it's actually the lower portion of the exterior lower panel pattern piece. So you'll see here, there's the dash line and it says slip pocket fold line. So you're going to fold your pattern piece at that dash line, and then you're going to use it to cut your interior slip pocket pieces on the fold. And for each one, I have a matching piece of fusible interfacing. Now in the second lining panel, we're going to install our interior zipper pocket. So you'll need a zipper pocket facing piece. This is 10 inches wide by 2.5 inches high and matching interfacing. And then you need 2 zipper pocket lining pieces. These are 10 inches wide by 7.5 inches high. For your convenience, anything that's cut to measurement is in this gray box on the lining pattern piece. Then you'll also need your gusset pieces, 16 inches by 3 3/4 inches with matching interfacing. And I have my 8-inch zipper. And then to make your adjustable straps. Now, in the pattern, I instruct how to make them using fabric. I'm not going to use fabric, I'm going to use cork. And I did cut them exactly how I mentioned in the cutting chart, 4 inches by 44 inches. But I'm actually going to show you in this video how to do it differently so that there's less bulk at the rectangle slides around the middle bar. I will show you that a little bit later, so I won't go into too much detail, but for now, just cut pieces according to what is mentioned, the dimensions mentioned in this little cutting chart. And then 2 rectangle ring straps, 2 inches wide by 5 inches high. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fuse my interfacing to all of my pieces, as I mentioned in the interfacing section of the pattern. And I'm also going to show you how to glue your firm sew-in interfacing to your flat contrast piece. I just interfaced all of my pieces, so they all have their matching fusible interfacing. Fused to the wrong side, and then there's just the 2 pieces that have fleece. There's the main flap and the lower flap. I'm just going to, because there's 2 pieces that need a little bit different interfacing, and that is your flap contrast piece. The flap contrast piece actually needs the Peltex or the firm sew interfacing glued to it to the wrong side. So I'm using Peltex Sew-In, and I'm going to take my fabric glue and I'm just going to apply some glue to the wrong side. I should have grabbed a fresh bottle. This glue is almost empty. Okay. And I need to glue this. And I'm using my ruler for placement. I need to glue this where there is 1/2 inch of space on either side here and 1/2 inch of space along the top edge. Okay, that's where these clear rulers come in very handy. All right, and I'm just going to set this aside with something heavy over top. Now, as I mentioned previously, you're not going to be using your foam interfacing cut from the lining pattern piece just yet. I'll show you during exterior assembly when we're going to use these pieces. So for now, just set them aside. Now for my exterior gusset, you have 2 pieces of foam interfacing. So I want to remove some of the bulk at the center seam where we're going to sew these 2 pieces together. So I'm just going to trim away the seam allowance from one shorter side of both of my foam pieces. So I'm going to trim away 3/8 of an inch from this one and also from this one. And I'm just doing that at the center where we're going to sew these pieces together. Now I will just clip these to the wrong side of my cork. If you're using vinyl or exterior fabric, that's fine. I'm using cork. So I won't finish clipping that, but so I'm going to finish clipping it, and then I'm going to bring it over to my machine, and I'm going to zigzag stitch just along these 3 sides. You can leave this side loose, it doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to do the same for the second piece. Okay, so I'm just going to finish clipping and zigzag around the 3 sides to base the foam to the cork, and then I can show you how to assemble these pieces later on during the exterior assembly. Now before we continue to video 2, I just wanted to show you my exterior gusset pieces. You'll see I've basted the foam to the wrong side of both, and you have a space here where I've trimmed away the seam allowance from the foam pieces. And when we'll be sewing it together during the exterior assembly, when we sew it together, we won't have the bulk of the foam inside the seam allowance here. So that's it for video 1. Join me for video 2. In which we will make the main flap. We'll start making the main flap of the bag, and we'll also build the exterior front panel of the bag.